So, today we're going to try and crack the code on the strange, super secretive, and let's be honest, often bizarre world of Brazil's elite. We're going to figure out what it really means to be rich there.
And, this quote from writer Clara Drummond, it just nails it. It perfectly sets the stage. Because the reality we're about to dive into is so over the top, you'd think it was made up for a movie. Our investigation kicks off with a real-life story that is almost too weird to be true. A situation that when you first hear it makes absolutely zero sense. Okay, so picture this. You've just touched down in Miami. The global capital of shopping, all set for an amazing vacation. But instead of breezing through to your fancy hotel, you get pulled into a little back room by some very serious-looking immigration agents. So what was their big crime? Well, it wasn't about what they had with them. It was about what they didn't have. Not a single suitcase, nothing. Their whole plan was just to buy everything they needed in the U.S., and they had a wallet packed with count 'em, six unlimited black credit cards to do it.
And that's the heart of the paradox, right? The U.S. immigration officers just could not wrap their heads around it. You're in the land of consumerism, so why on earth would you treat people who are literally about to inject tens of thousands of dollars into your economy like they're criminals?
The way they behaved was so, foreign, even to Americans, that it actually got them detained. And that tells us something huge. Being rich in Brazil isn't just about the money in your bank account. It's a whole different language, a performance. So let's crack this code.
Okay, so our first clue shows us that the world of the Brazilian elite is basically a fortress. And to get inside, you can't just flash some cash at the door. Oh no, you have to pass a series of unwritten secret social tests. Yeah, this is not a friendly welcome wagon. The old money crowd is constantly on guard, and they set these little social traps to figure out if newcomers actually belong or if they're just, outsiders who got lucky with some money. And these tests, they have a pattern. First up is the busyness test. In Brazil, unlike a lot of other places, having tons of free time is not a status symbol. An impossibly full schedule is. Then there's the scene test. Well, they'll create some kind of awkward, dramatic moment just to see if you know the unspoken rules of how you're supposed to react. And finally, you've got the bait test, casually dropping the first name of a famous person or a massive sum of money, just to see if you flinch or if you play it cool like it's totally normal.
Now for our second clue, which takes us even deeper. If being rich isn't just about the money, then what is it about? Well, it turns out the real currency of the elite isn't dollars and cents. It's cultural. This all revolves around a key idea called Coisa de Rico, which translates to things of the rich. And these aren't just expensive things you can buy. No, their real power comes from what they represent to a very, very small group of people who are in on the secret. Here's a perfect way to think about it. A Rolex basically shouts to the whole world, I have money. But a very specific, maybe less flashy model of a Cartier watch, that just whispers to the right people, I am one of you. One is about pure financial power. The other is about cultural knowledge, about belonging. And that brings us to our final clue. And honestly, this one is maybe the most powerful and subtle difference of all. It's not about what you own, it's about your relationship with time itself. It all boils down to the story they tell. New money talks about pontos de virada. These are the big turning points. Their story is all about struggle, conquest, and transformation. But old money? They talk about their status as having existed desde sempre, since always. Their story is one of timeless, stable inheritance. One group talks about conquering time, the other group acts like they've always owned it. All right, let's recap. We've got the clues, the secret social tests, the secret cultural currency, and the two very different ways of looking at time. Now it's time to put all the pieces together and finally solve this thing.
And what we found? It all comes down to a single number. A number that explains everything. The paranoia, the gatekeeping, and that bizarre scene back at the Miami airport.
0%. That's it. That's the number. So get this. In a huge national survey, people were asked to identify their social class. The percentage of Brazilians who call themselves rich? 0. Not one person. How is that even possible in a country with one of the biggest concentrations of wealth on the entire planet?
Well, here's the verdict. It's because in Brazil, being rich isn't a state of being. It's not a finish line you cross.
It is a constant, exhausting, and kind of fragile relationship.
You see, you're never just rich, period. You are only rich in relation to somebody else. And in that kind of system, there is always, and I mean always, someone higher up the ladder who makes you feel poor by comparison.
The research gives us this incredible real-life example. There's a guy who sold his hospital network for a fortune, but he feels insecure next to his neighbor because that guy built an elevator for his yacht. But then that neighbor feels small compared to his son-in-law, who's from a family with generations of untouchable political wealth. It just never ends.
It is an infinite ladder of comparison, and that explains everything. It explains the fear of outsiders, the secret tests, the need to signal that you belong, and it explains why Mario Jorge and Claudette acted in a way that seemed totally illogical to everyone else. They were just performing their role, trying to secure their spot on that ladder.
So, the biggest takeaway here is that being rich in Brazil isn't some comfortable status you just get to enjoy. It's a full-time, high-stress job of constant social positioning. It's a performance you can never, ever afford to stop.
And that leaves us with one last question, one that kind of turns the camera back on all of us. Because this dynamic, this constant need to compare, that's not just for billionaires, is it? So it's worth asking yourself, in your own life, who are you rich in relation to?